In the last story, a clan was destroyed in a strait at the western end of Japan. On the Kyushu shore, they say the men came back as crabs, and the women went west, into the rivers, and became something else. It is the size of a child, stronger than any grown man, and it carries a shallow plate of water on its head. It waits where the river runs shallow enough to walk across. If it calls your name out of the water, you do not answer. If it asks you to wrestle, you do not accept. For centuries, that was not superstition. It was the rule at the crossing. The way looking both ways is a rule now. This is the story of a man who accepted, and of the one thing that beats it, which is not strength. 3 things this story assumes you know. Wrestling, here, is not only a sport. It has been tied to right from very early on. In the Kojiki, our oldest chronicle, a contest of strength between 2 gods is part of how a country changes hands, and matches are still dedicated at shrines for rain and for the harvest. So when something at a river's edge asks you to wrestle, it is inviting you into a rite. And a rite has a winner, a loser, and a payment. Then there is the plate. There is a shallow hollow on top of its head, and the water sitting in it is where the strength lives. Let it spill, and there is nothing left. And there is what it takes. In one widespread belief, it is not flesh it wants, but something hidden inside the body. It takes that under the water, and the body that comes back shows no wound to explain it. A rite you are invited into, a strength that can be spilled, and something inside you that can be taken. This is not one story, and it never was. The Kappa reaches us in 4 layers. Village water spirits with no date on them. Edo scholars who wrote the creature up as if it were an animal. One dated account from a single district, which supplies the horse and the medicine in the second half of this video. And a modern name that gathered all of it under one face. I will open the seams between them as we go. I am a Japanese storyteller, and I return to the Japanese sources to bring their words and their world into English, with some moments dramatized for a modern audience. Start with the water, not a lake and not a sea. A river shallow enough to walk across, at a place where the road meets it, the ford. Most villages had one. Children were sent across it with a horse. Women crossed it with laundry. It was the most ordinary place in the world, and it was where people drowned. And in that water, people said, there was something. It stood about as high as a child of 10, and it was built like nothing else. A shell on its back, skin like a wet stone, hands with a web between the fingers, a beak instead of a mouth. It smelled of river, and on its head, it wore that plate of water. Here is the first seam. What I have just described is not one creature. In the east of Japan, they called it Kappa, worn down from an older phrase meaning river child. Around the old capital, it was Gataro, the river boy. In the west, Enko, a monkey word. In the far north, Medochi. In Kyushu, Hyosube. 30 names at least, and under each of them a slightly different animal. And that face you are picturing, shell, beak, plate, is already the second layer. Edo scholars wrote the thing up as if they were describing an animal, its diet, its habits, and its liking for a wrestling match. In print in 1709 and again in 1712. But across a great many of those regions, the same 3 things come back. A spirit at a dangerous crossing, strength far beyond its size, and a challenge to wrestle. The people who accepted were found later, downstream, drowned in water they could have stood up in. So, a man on his way home in the evening at the ford, alone. The voice came out of the water, and it used his name. He should have kept walking. Everyone knew that. But it is very hard to ignore your own name, and when he looked, it was already standing in the shallows, up to its knees, patient, the water on its head absolutely level. "Wrestle me," it said, and he said yes. Understand what he had agreed to, not a fight. Sumo has a form. You face each other, you settle, and before anything else, you bow. That bow is not politeness on top of the contest. It is the contest starting. And the manners are not optional, not for him, and, as it turned out, not for it either. So the man stood in the mud on the bank, and he bowed. Slowly and much lower than he had to. And the thing in the water, which had been wrestling men at that crossing for longer than the village had existed, bowed back. The plate on its head tipped forward. The water ran out of it into the river and was gone in a moment. No sound, nothing to see, just a little more river in the river. It tried to straighten up and could not. It went down on its hands in the shallows, like a man who has been hit and has not worked out yet that he has been hit. The strength was simply not there. And it looked up at him with an expression he did not expect from something that had drowned people. For a moment, it almost looked embarrassed. He could have finished it. Men in these stories often do. He filled his hands from the river instead, poured the water back into the plate, and walked home. Because you do not kill a thing that belongs to the river while you are standing in the river. Here is the second seam. That move is the one part of this everybody in Japan knows. Bow, and it bows back. It turns up in villages hundreds of miles apart, and it is the answer all of them reached. You cannot outpull a river. You can only make it keep the forms. Now I can name a year. In 1754, a man in Harima, the west of what is now Hyogo Prefecture, published a collection of strange things reported in his own province. Not old legends, local incidents with places and families attached to them. One of them is about a river creature and a horse in the Sayo district. He puts the night itself about 40 years before his book, in his parents' generation. A horse was left at the water's edge in the evening. Kappa take horses. That is not a detail from this one book. It is one of the most widely reported things they do in provinces the length of the country. They come out of the water, take hold of a horse, and try to pull it in. No single explanation for that has ever won out. What a great many of the stories agree on is how it goes wrong. A frightened horse does not go into a river. It runs, and whatever is holding onto it comes too. So the horse came up the bank at speed, dragging the thing behind it, and did not stop until it was standing in a lit yard with people in it. There was a warrior in that house. He came out to a horse shaking in his yard, with a creature the size of a child still holding onto it, and he drove the thing off with his sword. In the struggle, it lost an arm. It went over the wall and was gone into the dark. And that loss is what brought it back to the house a few hours later in the middle of the night. It came to that door of the house, the thing that had been strong enough to hold a horse, and it begged for what it had lost. It had a case to make, and it made it. If it was given back quickly enough, it said, the injury could still be mended. It would never trouble anyone from that village again, nor the animals. And it had something to trade. What it offered was a recipe, a medicine that sets broken bones and closes wounds, which is exactly the knowledge you would expect from something that can lose a limb and mend it in a few days. The household listened, and they gave it back. That is where the Harima account ends, and that is where the rest of Japan begins. because variants of that same night, the creature caught, the plea, the bargain, turn up far beyond Harima, and in many of them, the villagers want the promise in writing. So the creature signs. Some of those papers were kept. Families and temples around Japan will still tell you they hold one. An apology from a Kappa with a handprint on it. And the medicine did not stay in the story either. Recipes for bone-setting ointment, said to have come from a river creature, turn up in Edo books and in family papers. Actual preparations, with an origin story attached, recorded and sold and used by people who did not necessarily believe a word of it. That is the strange shape of this thing. The monster is not real. The paper is real. 3 things about this that are easier to see from inside Japan. First, the name won, and that matters. Kappa was an Eastern word, and printed books carried it across the country until it was a national one. Gataro and Enko and Medochi and Hyosube are still spoken where they belong, but they are local now, and Kappa is the word that stands for all of them. And what you picture when you hear it is not folklore on its own. It is folklore put through illustration. The plate, the beak, the shell, settling into one standard creature in Edo picture books, and carried the rest of the way by modern print and advertising. Second, it may have been a god first. One influential reading, associated above all with the folklorist Yanagita Kunio, is that the Kappa keeps traces of an older water deity. From there, the details stop being random. The cucumbers people leave for it were an offering. The wrestling match was a rite. And that is why the answer is a bow. You are not tricking a monster. You are dealing with something that was once approached through ritual at that crossing, and still expects the forms to be kept. Third, it kept a court. On the Kyushu side of that strait from the last story, they say the women of the destroyed clan came ashore and went into the rivers, and that the wife of one of their commanders is a chief among the Kappa there. There is a stone for her by the sea at Moji. Further south, one tradition even counts them. 9,000 in one river system under one leader, until a warlord drove them out with monkeys and they moved to the next river. And now it is a cartoon. It is on bottles and shop signs and children's hats. A thing that once took children out of rivers has been made harmless in modern Japan by the country that was afraid of it. Next time, something else comes down that river, a peach, and what was inside it. If you want these stories the way Japan tells them, subscribe.